Welcome back to the Drag Reduction Sisters podcast. Today we are reviewing the Austrian Grand Prix. I am joined by Niamh and Lexi, and I am Fee. Oh, my voice just broke.
I didn't notice it. Don't worry.
I did the Max Verstappen voice break.
Radio check. Loud and clear.
And I am Fee. So, welcome, guys.
Woohoo.
Hi.
Hello.
Did we enjoy this race?
Yes, very much.
Of course we did. What a cracker.
And it was a sprint, which was another thing to remember that, oh wait, quali's on Friday and having to get your calendar organized because I was forgetting what time everything was starting.
Oh my God, same. I'm all over the shop because of it.
But I am glad that there is a break between Austria and France just so I can get my heart rate back down.
It's felt a bit intense over the last couple of weekends. We've had so much action. We need a break. I dread to think how the drivers feel.
I know. I'm exhausted sitting on my ass watching on TV. Okay, let's get stuck in. So as usual on our podcast, we review the race by looking at the DRS. So that is drama, results, and something beginning with S. So let's kick off with drama. And there was a lot of drama in quali.
Ooh, yeah. It was my favorite quali.
Yeah, like the track limits in quali alone were just a nightmare. Just so many laps like deleted. It was like, I have no idea who is going to make it through and who's going to get kicked out. Just stress.
And then we had that weird situation where everyone's track limits were getting decided sort of there and then. Their laps were being deleted, but then weirdly Checo's didn't in that moment.
And that was
we
weird.
had that all decided after the fact, and that rearranged the order yet again. It was just chaos.
Very strange. Like Ted is there in the pit lane. He's like, Checo's going back out into Q3, but we don't even know if he should be here. This is bizarre. And you're like, what is going on? Like, just messy.
It is. And it's painful because you know there are drivers in Q2 that would have loved a chance to have been there.
Yeah.
Because even though they did get moved up, they're always going to think, yeah, well, I could have done better. So
Exactly.
why didn't I have a chance? Yeah.
Yeah, especially with two Mercs spinning out or crashing onto into the gravel, into the walls. That was unexpected.
Yeah. I seen a funny meme where it was like Russell tells his engineer, like, Hamilton's in the wall. And then the engineer goes, copy that. And then Russell copies that.
Yeah, I saw that
From
too.
the wall.
He follows instructions exactly.
So is the general consensus that was because of the wind?
That's what they're saying. I mean, I guess like when you look at the actual aero design of the car, it is a very different philosophy to the other cars. So perhaps that's why it might be more sensitive to wind. Yeah, it was just funny. I thought I was watching a replay and I was like, no, it's George. What the hell?
Deja vu. I've seen this before. I'm sure of it.
Yeah, I know how this ends and not well.
I don't know when Lewis made that mistake, I was like, I can't remember the last time Lewis has made a mistake in like qualifying or practice. It was very unlike him.
Yeah, I think I heard a stat. Now I may have made this up, but I think he hasn't like crashed out of quali since 2017 or something.
Wow.
Goodness me. That's impressive.
I might need
isn't it?
to fact check myself on that, but I could swear Ted said something like that. The damage done to Hamilton's car was pretty significant. Toto was saying basically like a Lego car that had just been dropped. There were just pieces everywhere.
Yeah, I saw him say on Sunday, I think, that after they'd finished off repairing all the cars, they'd basically had to install, his words, a barn door on one of the cars for a rear wing. I think it may have been George's. I can't remember exactly which car it was. I'm going to assume it was George's, given the fact that Lewis finished so well in the end. But he said it sounds like they were running so low on parts, and I think that's probably quite a common thing, it seems, this year.
Yeah,
that everybody's running so light on parts for cost cap reasons, etc. Then having both cars out in qualifying or the sprint is a nightmare.
And then the sprint, even that was full of drama. It didn't even start, and there was already
oh my god.
I have a bone to pick with Alpine this week.
The floor is yours. Go for it.
Oh, just Otmar. I don't know. I'm sorry, Otmar. If you're listening to this, I'm sure you're a lovely man, but please explain what was happening with Alonso's car at the start of the sprint. Because there has to be some reason. It can't just be forgetfulness that you forget to take the tire covers off.
So I think they couldn't actually fire the car up.
Oh, God.
Yeah, I saw some
all.
sort of electrical problem.
Yeah, and then when they brought it into the pit lane, they were trying to like manually start it with the laptops and all this kind of stuff, and it like still wasn't kind of turning on or something. Yeah, initially I was just like, how could the one person whose job is to take the blankets off not realize that they're still on? And I'm like, oh, okay, maybe there's more sense to this.
And that led to 2 formation laps, which caused even more carnage because then
poor Joe
has an issue.
That guy
just
can't catch a break.
He really can't. I think Oscar Piastri is in his garage every week just slashing up his engine. Just like, this should have been my seat. I'm going to make you pay for it.
Poor Joe.
I mean, that's how rumors start.
And then there was even more madness because they were, how many, was it 4 or 5 drivers called to the stewards after the session because they'd communicated with their engineers, or their engineers had communicated with them on that formation lap, which they're not allowed to do. Subsequently, it seems like they were all just talking about using the pit limiter, so to limit their speed for safety reasons. So thankfully, there were no penalties dished out at that point. But carnage, chaos.
And then once the actual sprint started, we seen some spicy stuff happen between teammates, not even between other drivers, between teammates themselves.
Yeah, the Ferrari boys now, they scared me because they just
in a good way.
In a good way. Like, I was like, okay, this is promising. They're competing. I was like, they're competing with each other a bit too much. Like, Max is just riding off into the distance and the two of them are squabbling. And it's like, okay, I get that you both want to be the alpha driver here. That was actually a bad choice of words because there's 2 other teams that have alpha in their name. But yeah, like I kind of feel like Ferrari need to step in at a certain point when you're at a disadvantage in terms of points deficit to Red Bull. Ferrari, as we'll discuss later, are still having so much reliability problems that when your 2 cars are actually working, maybe don't waste too much rubber on your tires or time fighting each other so much, and maybe try and catch up to Max. But at the same time, they're racing drivers and they want to come out on top even against their teammate. So frustrating to watch, but also entertaining.
I mean, I was watching it between my fingers. Like, I was absolutely convinced that this was going to be the moment that it was all going to boil over. And I don't want to jinx things, but if it carries on like this, there's going to be a moment where they come together because they're both not going to back down. So after what we saw last week, I was convinced that was going to be the moment, but thankfully we didn't see it. But you're right. You know, at what point do they step in and say, hang on, we need to think about what we're going to do for the team?
Yeah. With Red Bull, it's very clear they have the first and second driver, whereas Ferrari don't. And that's something they need to sort out. But this late into the season, you kind of wonder, how do you do that? Yeah,
it's kind of like, because Carlos got that win and it's really like boosted his point score up, and now they're closer together. It's making it harder for Ferrari to be like, oh well, there's a very clear number 1 driver here, because Carlos is going to be like, well, actually there isn't really. But in terms of pace, it does look more like, Charles will come out on top. And it's surprising because Ferrari over the years don't seem to mind being unpopular, in that they'll prefer one driver over the other. I mean, Michael Schumacher in general was the number 1. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see how it unfolds over the next while, but they were probably kind of relieved that they didn't have to step in this race and tell that one or the other to back off.
Yeah.
And then we had more of the same with Lando and Daniel, and K-Mag and Mick too.
Oh yes, Mick. Okay, random comment, but Mick looks so much like his dad when he's angry.
Oh my god, it's unbelievable.
Uncanny.
It's the image. Oh my god,
it was insane.
But, yeah, I had no idea that they were quite upset with each other in that, or rather, I think Mick was more upset with Kevin. I don't think Kevin.
Yeah, Kevin had no idea what was going on. He's like, oh, really? Okay, whatever.
But Mick, he was fighting. I think ever since the points, it's really boosted his confidence because he was battling with his teammate, and then throughout the weekend as well, he was battling with Lewis again. I was really impressed. But I wonder now how HAASta are going to deal with that, because like at the start it was kind of, Kevin's coming in with the experience, Mick's here to learn, blah blah blah. But now they're getting kind of frustrated, and it's like, well, once he goes ahead, he just kind of ditches me. Like, he doesn't help out.
Yeah. One word answers from Mick. That's something we've never seen before. Quite
Very
intense.
much so. But I it just seemed a bit strange that, like, Mick was fighting K-Mag, fair enough. Then Lewis catches up to them. And it's at that point, Mick is like, okay, I need Kevin to hang on in there in the 1 second range so that he could have DRS to help defend from Hamilton. And, in that Sky interview when Mick is very, very fiery, he was saying that he had asked for that, and we heard that on the team radio. But then Kevin was asked about it, and he was like, "Oh no, that wasn't said to me." So I'm like, did the team just not pass on that message? Like, it just seems stupid because Mick lost out in points in the sprint because of that, or was it Kevin just looking after himself? I don't know.
I would love to go back. I need to go back and listen to the team radios to actually figure out what happened there, because you're right. It seems really strange. Why, when you're in such a good fighting position off the back of another really good result, you're gaining momentum. Austria is a good track for you as a team historically. Why would you not take every opportunity to capitalize on it? And, if it's a case of driver number one needs to drag driver number two down the road, then so be it, in my mind.
Yeah, I agree.
Another team that had a kind of, I suppose, squabble were McLaren, Lando and Daniel in the sprint, which isn't the first time we've seen this. So on one hand, I was thinking, oh, here we go again. Uh-oh. But on the other hand, I thought it was nice that they were still trying to be competitive, given how badly practice and qualifying had gone for them originally. But
I think overall, McLaren had a pretty solid weekend, I think. But again, there's that question around making the right calls for the greater good and letting people race. I think I'd said it last week. I think when these battles are so closely fought between teammates, I think everybody feels better about it when the drivers are allowed to race each other, because then whoever comes out on top is able to fight fair. Yet I think Daniel had he had quite a good start to the sprint. He got ahead of Lando. They were sort of chopping and changing a little bit. At one point, again, Daniel was asked to hold behind Lando. There was too much drama going on everywhere else to keep up with what the two of them were doing. But yeah, I think there's definitely still an element. And again, we know that Lando is the number one driver there. We get that.
So there seemed to be a vendetta this weekend against Sebastian Vettel, and I'm not okay with it. Well, firstly, he had a horrendous qualifying, and so did Lance. But in the sprint, he seemed to be making up a lot of places, and he was kind of, making back a lot of positions, and it was going so well. And then he went to overtake Alex Albon right around the outside, and they touched, and Alex then got a 5-second penalty for that. But Seb's race was pretty much ruined. But then, there was another race to go, the actual Grand Prix. And I was like, yeah, he can recover. And he did. And then he tried to overtake Pierre, and Pierre also touched him and sent him off into the gravel. So if everyone could just give him some space, that would be great.
I was just thinking about this. Did Alex get the penalty for Seb? Because I thought he got it for when he pushed Lando off the track.
Oh, actually, you might be right.
But that goes, I mean, that kind of goes to show, like, I think we're being really inconsistent again, aren't we, with some of the decisions that are being made. It's a bit all over the place. And I know that Alex said after the race, he was quite frustrated because he felt that the sort of message after Silverstone was let everybody race, and then he wasn't allowed to race in Austria, which was interesting.
Yeah, I think you're right, actually, about Alex not getting a penalty for that one.
Do you know who did get a penalty, though? And actually, they didn't mention it for quite a while. I was starting to think they weren't going to penalise him. George Russell and then Checo. That was history repeating itself with Lewis and Alex at that corner. Oh god. But I swear, if it had been any other driver or team, it would have been, oh, that's going to be investigated, blah blah blah. But it wasn't brought up for like ages, and then just like 10 laps later, oh, by the way, George, you have a penalty for that thing that happened at the very start.
Yeah, it was odd, really, wasn't it? And it was such a shame for Checo, I thought, because he'd made such a nice recovery. Again, he seems to be the king of recovery drives at the moment. Like he'd gone from, I think, 13th up to 5th, like 5 spots in the opening 6 laps or something crazy in the sprint. So he was on to a really good weekend after quite a disappointing qualifying.
Yeah, he had to retire then at the end. So
yeah, it's hard to know. Was it more of a first lap incident, or was a penalty justified for George? Kind of a grey area. I'm not entirely sure. I guess George is probably slightly more at fault, but yeah.
It's just one of those things where you don't want to be the FIA and have to make those decisions. But in a way, it kind of balanced out the championship slightly, because we did lose a Red Bull, but we also lost a Ferrari towards the very end.
That's a very good point. Very good point.
I was heartbroken for Carlos. Anytime that the Ferrari or Red Bull radio comes on, I'm like, uh-oh, what's gone wrong? And I was like, oh, look, it's smoking up like it does in the game. Oh, he has to pull over. Oh my God, it's on fire!
Like that fire just escalated very quickly. Like you're kind of like, oh, it's just at the back of the car. And then it's like, okay, it's actually kind of engulfing the cockpit. And because he had pulled in to the runoff area or the kind of escape road that was on a slope, and the car is just rolling backwards because there's no handbrake in the car. And I was like, oh my God, like he's trying to press the brake and get out, and the fire is catching up. And there seemed like a bit of confusion or not enough urgency from the marshals. Like I was screaming at the TV. I was like, somebody help him. Somebody put something under the wheels to stop it rolling.
It seemed to go on forever, didn't it? It was like nobody was coming to him, and he was gesturing wildly to get people to come and put something underneath the wheel to stop the car from moving. It's all very dramatic.
Yeah. It just started rolling backwards, because how are you supposed to get out of the car, first of all, when you're just going to fall back? And then also, what if it kept rolling and it hit another car on track? Like there was so much. And when they actually cut the camera away a bit and they were showing like the team principals and stuff, I was like, oh no, I don't like the fact that they're not showing us.
Yeah, it was a bit of a scary moment. Like it must have been so hot in that car as well to remain calm in that situation.
Yeah, not to panic.
Yeah, incredibly stressful. But that's his 4th DNF in 11 races now.
Oh God. That's so grim. Like the Ferrari reliability just, you kind of think, oh yeah, they seem to be turning a corner, but it's just constantly there. And even like, K-Mag was managing engine issues as well during the Grand Prix.
Yeah.
And that's another Ferrari powered engine. And then, I guess we'll get on to different. Yeah, he has had so many problems this year. Oh, my God.
And Charles's throttle pedal in the final laps as well.
Oh my God. Yeah. Every time the team radio came up, I literally gasped. Oh, I thought I was going to pass out.
I thought it was going to be Monaco all over again when Danny Rick was losing power and he was fighting for it. But I mean, fair play to the guy for managing to keep hold of it. And it sounded like he was having to lift the pedal up from underneath using his toes and then push it back down again. Incredible.
Very unusual. But I must say, like, fair play to him for keeping it together, because I know Charles, he sometimes sounds a bit panicky on the radio, but you can tell that he's almost in a way used to dealing with this. It's like, oh, here's Ferrari trouble again. Guys, sort your beef. And I'll try and bring
Don't worry, guys, we trained for this. Trained for this.
Engage crisis management mode. Oh.
Yeah. But that's what, even on the radio afterwards, like, he was so happy and he was like, I was really scared. You were scared.
Yeah, we all were.
Yeah, you and me both.
Okay, so should we move on to the results then? What was the most surprising result for you?
In terms of driver of the day, I was stuck between 2 particular drivers because I thought their results were so impressive. And that was Esteban and Mick. And the fact that they're friends made it even harder when I was voting. I was like, oh no. But I think Mick just had the weekend of his career. It was so, so impressive. I'm so happy for him.
Yeah, I agree. I actually voted Bottas for driver of the day because to come out of the pits and almost get into the points, like he was in the points up until
Yeah,
Alonso.
true.
I thought that was really good for him because he was with a dodgy Ferrari engine. So he had a little battle going on there. But I'm so happy that Mick is fighting, not like getting into fights, but fighting on the track. And he's getting his elbows out and he's not afraid now. It was almost weird when Lewis was on the radio, first of all saying that his tires were okay. I was like,
Yeah,
what
I know, that's
universe is
always a
this?
shock to the system. You're like, wait, what?
Yeah. But then the best was when Lewis says, the Haas are so fast on the straights. And I'm
I
like,
know.
what?
It's like a fever dream.
And they haven't
Yeah.
brought any updates yet either.
I
Aren't the
know.
updates coming for Paul Ricard?
I heard an interview with Gunther and they were asking about updates and he was like, oh, updates, I think they're overrated. But I think they might be coming for Hungary. So that's the race after Paul
okay.
Ricard.
Okay.
But who knows with Haas, maybe they won't bother.
I mean,
they
it
seem to
doesn't
be
seem
doing pretty well.
broken. It doesn't seem broken. Maybe don't fix it right now.
Yeah. It's very interesting though. Like they really shut up there and he was fighting with Lewis a lot of the weekend. And you know, even in a bad car, Lewis can still pull through. I mean, he was another good result. He ended up getting on the podium in the end, P3,
Yeah.
after what was quite an embarrassing qualifying for him. So that was nice to see as well.
Yeah, it seems like we've just seen a bit of a level up from Mick over the last couple of weekends. We've seen him find some fire. If you've seen that picture of him where he's really angry, he looks just like his dad.
Yeah.
He's definitely stepping up and he's found his confidence. He's found a groove, definitely, and was really impressive.
Definitely less mistakes as well. Like I think, you know, he's gotten into point scoring positions like a good few times and it's just kind of been squandered, like just with a silly, you know, lunge that he didn't really need to make, or, you know, positioning the car in the wrong place. Yeah, the one with Seb, which was heartbreaking. Oh my God. No, he definitely seems to be a bit more composed. So it's great to see. So fingers crossed it continues.
It is. Another result I'd like to bring up is not only the double points for Haas, but also double points for Alpine and McLaren, who are now tied in the constructors, which I'm torn between because they're my two favorite teams right now. But that was really good to see from my perspective anyway, but especially for McLaren, who just were not having a good weekend for practice or qualifying. Yeah. And it was weird because it's like Daniel hasn't been scoring points as consistently as you would like him to, and yet he seemed not very happy in the interview afterwards.
No,
he had more this weekend, didn't he?
Yeah, and that's
which is kind of a running theme with McLaren. Daniel kind of saying, you know, okay, I think I can do more in clean air, you know, give me the chance to pass Lando by and see what I have. But I don't know. I think McLaren need to figure out their strategy in certain races. They just have been very slow to make decisions. And it's a tricky
almost
one.
Ferrari-esque, isn't it? Some of the decisions.
Yeah.
You can't really make heads or tails of it sometimes. But hey, after us talking about their pit stops last week, they heard us because they were back on the top of the pit stop leaderboard this weekend with Danny Rick's pit stop. That all went quite nicely in the race. So I think it just goes to show, doesn't it, that all is not lost. And there's still time to be won and there's still gains to be had.
Yeah, and the fact that they were frustrated with the double points shows that they believe there is more potential there. They weren't saying, you know, it was the best we could do. Like Lando was like, no, P6 was achievable today. They can see themselves up there, and I think that's important. They're not giving up just yet, like you said.
I just hope that this lack of updates isn't going to come at their detriment. It's just worrying that, you know, you're seeing such strides being made by the teams around them. You know, the car didn't seem perfect at the beginning of the year, you know, during testing and the first couple of races. It wasn't perfect by all means, but it seemed like a solid foundation to build on, but then it's not really been built on.
It's interesting because Haas did that last year, but that was on purpose because they were preparing for this year's car, which seems to have come to life now.
Yeah, it really
but
has.
You're kind of wondering, are McLaren preparing for next year instead? Why are they not trying to fix this car? I don't know. I guess we'll see after the summer break.
And if they are, then at what point do they come out and say we're just focusing more on next year?
Yeah, it's interesting.
I would like to talk about Pierre Gasly.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. What happened to him this year?
What has happened to him?
I think the car is definitely partly to blame, but
agreed.
there's mistakes there that are kind of not excusable.
Absolutely. I mean, you know, at Silverstone, we saw him involved in the Zhou incident. I know, you know, we've spoken about that, and we do think it was a racing incident, etc. But you could argue there was a gap there that wasn't really a gap, and he was going for it. So, you know, that was last weekend, and then this weekend he hit Seb, he hit Lewis. He ended up 15th after qualifying 10th.
Yeah.
It seems to be unraveling a little bit, and I hate to say it because, you know, we love Pierre, but what is going on there?
I think Pierre is just trying to be a real one for Yuki and take the attention away from him this week. He's seen Yuki getting called out by Helmut Marko and said, leave my bestie alone. I'm going to just get as many penalties and as many crashes as I can. So...
I really felt for Yuki with that whole thing. You could see on his face in the press conference that he was super uncomfortable. Yeah. It just feels really inappropriate to be talking about drivers' psychological needs in that way. But, you know, I think we've come to expect it from Helmut Marko at this point, unfortunately.
Yeah. And then Esteban said that we all love you. And I was like, oh, so true.
Yeah, that was very sweet.
There's a lot of the love on the grid at the moment, isn't there? They all love each other so much.
Ferrari,
and I'm not quite, except for Ferrari maybe, but there's a lot of love, and it's making me wonder, when is it all going to fall apart? Because we've not had a good rivalry for since Max and Lewis last year.
Well, Fernando wasn't feeling the love with Yuki when he was overtaking him and wagging his fingers. I was driving the car one-handed, overtaking and wagging his finger at him. I was like, this is just peak Alonso.
I love it.
He really made me laugh at the beginning of the race, before the race started, when he was complaining. It was on the grid. He was complaining about, I just hope that we don't all get stuck in a DRS train all race long. And I was thinking, hang on, mate, you're usually the one at the head of that DRS train.
In the mirror, man. Come on.
Well, I love Alonso so much. Like, he just cracks me up. But the thing is, Seb used to do the little finger wagging as well.
Yeah.
I love it so much. But in fairness, he was right to, because Yuki was pushing him onto the grass. He could have hit the DRS sign if he'd gone any further. But it wasn't unwarranted, absolutely. But yeah, I just love it when you see those flashes of the personality, like we saw Lando giving his steering wheel the middle finger. We saw similar from Daniel on the grid, flipping off his earpieces. So yeah, it's funny, isn't it, when you see those little moments of human in amongst these incredible machines of people. Yeah. Shall we move on then to the last letter in DRS? Something begin with S.
Yes. I would again like to put my Seb fan hat on and just, I don't even know where to begin. So, suspended fine for Seb. It seems like the usual Friday drivers briefing seemed to go on for quite a while this week, and talking about driver conduct and things like that. And they weren't really getting into the actual nitty gritty of, I guess, what was expected of them this weekend on track. The drivers apparently, well, it's kind of vague exactly what happened, but drivers were getting a bit agitated that they were rehashing the same things for 20 minutes and not actually getting stuck into the meeting. And apparently Seb got so annoyed that he basically said, well, if you're not going to actually talk about the important stuff, I'm leaving. And then just walked out. Mic drop. And then he gets a €25,000 fine. But because he went and I think apologized to the race director and tried to smooth things over, the fine has been suspended. But that means he needs to, I guess, behave himself from now on. But yeah, the race directors were saying, or the stewards were saying, that he was setting a bad example for other drivers and even motorsport athletes globally. And I'm like, this meeting is behind closed doors. We wouldn't have known anything if you hadn't have released this statement about the fine. So I don't know, but I respect his cojones.
Yeah, and I actually think of all the drivers there, Seb is amongst one of the best role models. You know, if you feel that you
Yeah.
aren't being listened to, people aren't listening to your needs, they don't care about your safety, your well-being, why should you just sit there? And I'm sure a lot of drivers were thinking, God, I wish I could do that as well. But the thing I'm worried about as a result of that is that it could have two effects, or maybe three. That could be nothing changes. But it could also lead to more drivers going, do you know what, I'm going to boycott these meetings if they're not listening. I'm going to stand my ground more firmly. Or it could have the opposite effect, and they see what happened to Seb and they go, God, Seb's been around ages. He's a really important voice. What would I get? You know, I'm not as famous or as liked as him. Would I get in more trouble if I tried to do the same? And it might silence someone away. So it'll be interesting to see if there's any more like this.
I think it's really indicative of the state of the relationship between the drivers and the stewards that it's Seb that is getting up and walking out of this meeting. It sounds like things are really coming to a head more often than not lately. We all saw what happened in Jeddah with that meeting that went on for hours. And I know, you know, we know he's a director of the GPDA, so, you know, he's got to take a stand and he's right to do so. But for Seb, in his experience and wisdom, and you know, he's fairly cool-headed now. He's very level-headed. He's very good at articulating what he's trying to get across. For
He's
him
been on
to get
Question
up,
Time.
yeah, exactly. For him to get up and go, do you know what, guys? This could have been an email, basically. That says a lot.
Yeah.
And it sounds like they were just going over the same thing over and over again. And at what point do they go, you know, this isn't working?
Yeah, and it also just seems the stewards aren't taking the drivers' concerns into consideration this year. Like when Carlos and Esteban both had crashes and, you know, there wasn't a Tech Pro barrier put up when I think was it Carlos had said that there should have been in a few races back, and just they're focusing on really trivial stuff like the whole jewelry and underwear stuff. Like, you know, you're kind of like, you have to figure out what the priorities really are. And I can see why the drivers are getting frustrated, because the stewards are changing pretty much every few races, and there's two race directors who are switching roles every so often, so there's no consistency in decisions. So yeah, I think the tensions are just going to continue to bubble over until I don't know what's going to happen, but I don't think it's going to be good.
Yeah. But we love it though.
Yeah, the drama.
It's great drama.
Oh god. On the note of like the FIA and the stewards and stuff, something else we can talk about is just so many penalties and the track limits. I think this is something that's going to come up in the next driver briefing. People are going to ask, why did I get a 5-second penalty for smashing my floor and losing 7/10 on a lap?
I did not gain an advantage.
At all. Like,
by the way, I like how you've shoehorned this in by saying so many penalties. That's great.
It's something beginning with us.
It's something beginning with us. I'll give you that. So I sat and I went through, and I think I've caught everybody. I wrote down all of the penalties or the sort of things that were referred to the stewards, right? Ooh. So we had Pierre, who got a 5-second penalty for his collision with Sebastian. He then got a 5 minute. 5 minutes?
Oh my god!
Whoa, he's still driving out there now.
5-second track limit penalty. Lando had a 5-second track limit penalty. George had a collision with Checo, which gave him a 5-second penalty. Zhou had track limit penalty. Seb had a track limit penalty, and he found out in the briefing afterwards when they were in the press pit. Awful.
It was literally on the last lap.
Oh, terrible. And then obviously we've had the drama of him leaving the drivers' meeting as well. Then we had Leclerc, Verstappen and Hamilton all taken to the stewards afterwards for their physios getting involved in Parc Ferme. And from what I could tell, that was because they didn't weigh those 3 drivers down by the cars in Parc Ferme. They weighed them up in the cool down room. So it seems like between those 2 points, their physios have been, chatting to them and what have you. And then we had all that drama as well of, at the beginning of the sprint race of engineers talking to certain drivers on the
radios. Yeah.
On the radios. So it was crazy. And we knew that the track limits thing was going to be a problem, because I don't know if either of you watched the F2, but they were giving out those penalties like sweets.
Oh my
and
God.
even the podium at the end changed after the fact.
No way.
Yeah.
Which was
First place
crazy.
was disqualified, wasn't he?
Yeah, I think that was a separate issue. I think the first place was disqualified, I think, because of a fuel problem.
Yeah.
I remember him saying like he was worried about the fuel, so maybe he wasn't able to provide a sample, but there were changes because of track limits, and it was like they were ramping up as well towards the end of the race as clearly their tires were going off. So I was actually surprised we didn't see more of it towards the end of the race.
Oh God, it seems excessive. Like there was one point in the race when I don't know, the entire like timing grid just did like a massive shuffle as a load of drivers came in and out of the pits for all different, like their different penalties. It was so hard to keep track of who had served their penalty, who hadn't, how many they had. Like it was ridiculous. But it seems like, I get that they're trying to be consistent. It's like, okay, well, if you're over the white line, you're over the white line. But if you're going off into the gravel and completely hampering yourself already, I don't see why you need to get have more time, served in the pits. Like,
I think there's two things that should be considered when it comes to track limits. Number one is the whole, are you actually gaining an advantage, or are you damaging your car and losing time? And the second is, these cars are designed in a new way with the tire covers and the bigger tires in general, that it's actually very difficult for the drivers to see the lines. And that's something that came up in pre-season testing when they were talking about the cars. I can't see the track. I can't see the state of my tires. So it's something they've known about for a while.
Yeah, I agreed. But at the same time, just to play devil's advocate, if they put a wall there, what would happen?
And they wouldn't touch it.
This is true.
Unless you like walls.
No comment. But
no comment.
But yeah, I get that it's very hard for them to see, but you would give a wall a lot more respect than you give a line.
That's true.
And at the end of the day, both of them are the edge of the racetrack. So
yeah.
That is very true. Do you know what, Lexi? You reminded me of Grosjean in the driver briefings, always playing the devil's advocate.
Oh, no.
I loved him in those meetings.
Oh,
it was so
me
funny.
too. My heart.
I have
Grosjean.
a question.
Just so I'm clear, if you take your seatbelts off, is that allowed?
You can't loosen them.
Just to stir the pot,
Yeah, but no, that is a very good point you're making, and I agree with it as well. That's why I think it's going to be probably another debate at the next driver meeting. Oh,
absolutely.
God.
I mean,
really wish those were on YouTube again.
Oh, same. Can someone break in, please, and just like upload to TikTok or something? You remember the videos that went around of Toto partying after the championship?
Yeah.
Someone do that and just put those
one of the drivers needs to just like live stream it like sneakily on their phone.
My money's on Yuki.
I was going to say Lando, because Lando will go on Twitter or something.
Okay, so finally, I would like to talk about the sprint format in general, because this was our second of 3 this year. They're proposing that we have 6 next year. It seems like the drivers are enjoying the sprints much more. I think there was a bit more hesitation around it last year. I know that Daniel came out and said he really enjoys the sprint format, and I mean he's probably the one that's capitalized the most off of it, because he got his infamous win off it last year. I know it's really tough on the teams as well, because especially within a packed schedule that is already difficult to manage, going straight into qualifying after one practice session is really tough. And we saw that play out with the accidents with George and Lewis and the scramble to get the cars back together. It creates a real time pressure. So it's probably hell to deal with from a team perspective. But oh my God, isn't it fun to watch?
It is. I think now the fact that they're actually awarding more points for it is what motivates people. Because there's 2 ways you can go at the sprint. There's one, I'm just going to keep my position because I did really good. or I didn't do good, so I need to make up space. And I think that's where people like Daniel really enjoyed the sprint, because I think his racecraft is so much better than his qualifying pace. And it gives him a chance to show that and build up a bit more than what he couldn't get out of the car on just one lap. But then you'd people like Esteban who did qualify really well, and he knew his race was just to keep his place. He wasn't going to try and go any higher because he knew where the car was supposed to be. And then he ended up bringing home the result on the Sunday. But I don't know how I feel about 6 sprint races. I think that's a bit much.
I think so
Six
too.
is a lot.
I think
is a lot.
the novelty will kind of wear off. Like,
Yeah.
I think if it's just kind of few and far between, you get more excited about it. You're like, oh, okay, sprint weekend, it changes things up. But I'm just afraid that they're going to oversaturate the whole thing just in the name of money.
Yeah.
But it's also tricky. I think a lot of the teams, the team bosses and so on, are kind of against it going to 6 or higher because the whole cost cap point of view, it's effectively another race, and there's going to be more damage potentially to resolve. So I don't know. Like, I do feel kind of bad for, as you were saying, Lexi, the teams involved. It's a lot more work for them to do, but it is definitely more entertaining for the drivers and for us to watch. But I hope they don't overdo it. But I like the idea of them maybe changing it around to different tracks, different years. I think it kind of adds a bit more interest to it.
As long as they're doing it on tracks where you can actually race.
Yeah, where it makes sense.
Yeah, because I think
Monaco.
I mean, Interlagos, it was Interlagos last year, wasn't it?
Yes.
For the Brazil sprint.
Yeah, Lewis.
It wasn't the most exciting race, but then again, they have made the cars that, the cars are different this year. They have made it so that it's easier to follow, it's easier to overtake. I mean, we saw that kind of play out with Pierre doing his overtakes in Monaco. So perhaps it's not such a big issue, but that would be my big watch out. Like, I don't want to watch 2 races in a weekend where you can't overtake.
Yeah, with just Fernando leading a train.
Yeah.
For 2 days.
Fernando for the win. Let's go.
Do we have any predictions for Paul Ricard?
I don't want to predict anything. Mine's just a hope. I bought the Alpine pink jersey because I keep saying to you guys every single week, if Alpine get a podium, I don't know. I'm like, I can't just buy it. I need an excuse.
But if you buy the merch, that might end up in them getting on the podium. You see what I mean? You gotta reverse engineer this.
So now that my pink jersey's arrived, I'm going to wear it on the weekend, and hopefully I will get my double Alpine podium. If not, I would love an Esteban win. A French driver, French engine, French team.
French engine.
French circuit. Yeah, the Renault engine.
I know. I'm just imagining it being like, wee wee.
Wee wee. It doesn't vroom vroom it. Wee wee. But that's not a prediction. That's what I hope. My actual prediction is that we're actually going to get some racing in Paul Ricard. I know
surely a first.
I know people are like, oh, Paul Ricard sucks and stuff. But I'm playing it on the new game, and I know it's not the same thing. But there's actually a lot of spots for overtaking now that the cars are much closer together. So I'm hoping that we'll actually get a lot more action, because last year we did have quite a few scraps. Like, you remember Pierre and Lando were pushing each other off the track. An overtake that Max did on Lewis, where it was the first time I really heard the crowd, apart from like Silverstone, where they would obviously be very loud. But the crowd were cheering so much, and like, it wasn't a home crowd or anything.
Yeah,
it gave me chills. So I think we're actually going to get some good racing action from France. That's my prediction.
Well, that would be good, wouldn't it? I'd really like Pierre to have a good race in front of his home crowd.
Oh,
I think he needs it. He seems like he's a bit flat at the moment. I think he could do with a bit of a boost. But prediction-wise, gosh, it's a hard one to call, isn't it? I'd really like to see Ferrari up there again. I think they really need to go well into this weekend off the back of 2, fairly strong weekends for them. So just build on that momentum and take it into the summer, the last couple of races before the summer break, so that they can take a step back and regroup and have a think about all of the opportunities that they've wasted.
Yeah, they need to do this if they want to stay in the fight, because at the moment Max is running away with the championship. Even if they're not going to get the drivers, it would still be good for them to get the constructors. So yeah,
and considering Max struggled with tire degradation you know, throughout the Grand Prix, just gone for Austria. Like, you know, that may not fall into, you know, Ferrari's hands going forward. So they really need to make sure that they don't do any crazy strategy calls or engine explosions.
Let's see. Do you have any predictions then before we end, Fiona?
Again, probably not predictions, more hopes. I feel like we haven't seen much of Bottas in a few races. He was on such a good run. He has, both him and Joe have had a lot of misfortune with car reliability issues on and off. But yeah, I'd like Bottas to have a really strong quali and then, yeah, a good race. And then who else? Yeah, it would be nice to see the French drivers do well. I'm looking forward to seeing Esteban's helmet, where he got fans to design a helmet for the French Grand Prix.
Yes.
So, and considering how like in love with memes Esteban seems to be recently on Instagram, I just feel like it's going to be hilarious.
Oh God, I'm nervous in a good way.
I think it's just going to be like a snail and a baguette and I don't know, just ultimate cheese.
Hopefully the car isn't on a snail.
This is true. Okay, I take that back. That would not be a good omen at all.
Well, if we see a snail and a baguette on his helmet, then we know that Fee was the one that designed the helmet.
He was frantically drawing on paint on my old laptop.
Oh God.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the Drag Reduction Sisters podcast. Make sure to follow us on all of our social media. We're on Twitter, we're on Instagram, we are on TikTok, and you can also get our podcast both on Spotify and on YouTube. We will be back with another race review, this time a double header looking at Paul Ricard and Budapest before the summer break with the silly season craziness. So we will talk to you then. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.